I have so much to learn from you, and it is my honor tonight to invite Mr. I'll try to pronounce your name right, Henk Hobbelink, to address us tonight. Mr. Henk, the floor is yours.
Madam Speaker, members of Parliament, fellow laureates, dear friends. 3 weeks ago, on the 16th of November, Christian Ferreira was shot dead by 2 masked men in front of his house and his family. Christian lived in Sant Antonio, a village north of Santiago de Estero in Argentina. He was part of an indigenous community and member of one of our partners in Argentina, the indigenous peasant organization Mocase Villa Campesina. His crime? To refuse to leave his homeland in order to make way for a massive soybean plantation, one of the so many that have been encroaching on rural communities throughout Argentina in the last decade. So the plantation owners had him assassinated. Christian was only 25 years old. Six weeks ago, on 26 October, 1 farmer died and 20 others were injured, 10 of them critically, in the village of Fanaya in northern Senegal. They too were trying to stop the takeover of their lands. Government officials had handed over 20,000 hectares surrounding their area to an Italian investor who wanted to grow sweet potato and sunflowers to produce biofuels for European cars. The project would displace whole villages, destroy grazing areas for cattle, and desecrate the local cemeteries and mosques. Fanaya is not an isolated case in Senegal. Over the past few years, nearly 500,000 hectares in Senegal have been signed away to foreign agribusiness companies. Gambela is a region in Ethiopia that borders with Sudan, with South Sudan. It's home to one of the most extreme cases of land grabbing we know today. Over half of the arable land of the region has been signed away to Indian, Saudi, and other investors who are now busy moving the tractors in and moving the people out. Ethiopia is a country which is in the midst of a severe food crisis and is heavily dependent on food aid to feed its people. Yet the government has already signed away about 10% of the country's entire agriculture area to foreign investors to produce commodities for the international market. Earlier this year, at Grain, we were involved in the production of a video on the situation of the indigenous Anuak people of Gambela, who now face losing their farms, their villages, and their ancestral territories. We wanted to help raise their voices to the international level and express their concerns. But in the video, we had to distort their voices and hide their faces to protect them from backlash at the Ethiopian government. One could go on with many more examples of how people who just want to grow food and make a living from the land are being expelled, criminalized, and sometimes killed to make room for the production of commodities and often someone else's wealth. Today, we are witnessing no less than frontal assault on the world's peasantry. This is not only happening in the global south. Here in the European Union, we have lost around 3 million farms since 2003. This amounts to a loss of 1/5 of all our farms in just 8 years. Living from the land is becoming more difficult and in many parts of the world more dangerous by the day. Peasants who have been feeding the world for thousands of years, and still are now increasingly being cast as backwards, inefficient, and obstacles to development. The not so subtle message is they should cease to exist. My organization, GRAIN, was established 20 years ago with the main concern to stop the erosion, the destruction of the world's agricultural biodiversity and the people traditional knowledge associated with it. We learned, however, that the problem was not so much the loss of indigenous seeds and breeds as it was about the loss of the people who create, nurture, and sustain that diversity. Genetic erosion, as we called it then, is really just a consequence of a larger development that is promoting industrial farming and leading to the annihilation of the world's rural people. But these people all over the world are fighting back. In all corners of the globe, there are dynamic movements of resistance and rebuilding where people are struggling to hold on to their territories and keep control over their own resilient food systems. Via Campesina, the international peasants movement, has called today, the 5th of December, the International Food Sovereignty Day to cool down the earth. Right now, Via Campesina members and their allies are out in the streets of Durban, South Africa, protesting about the negotiations over false solutions to climate change, which are happening there right now, and insisting that small farmers can not only cool the world, but they can feed it too. And they are right. The basic idea of food sovereignty, as Via Campesina has articulated it, is that the aspirations and the needs of those who produce, distribute, and consume food should be at the heart of our food systems, rather than the demands of the transnational corporations. It prioritizes local food production, it is based on agroecology and family farming, and it is oriented towards local markets. It keeps seeds and biodiversity in the hands of farming communities, and it keeps it GMO-free. It nurtures and builds on indigenous knowledge of soils, seeds, and farming systems. It recognizes and builds on the crucial and central role of women in farming. The world desperately needs food sovereignty. It is our best hope to solve the current planet's most pressing crisis. Today, over 1 billion people on this planet do not have enough to eat. Around 80% of these people are food producers living in the countryside. This intolerable situation is not due to the lack of food production or the lack of technology. It is due to governmental policies that deliberately replace peasant agriculture with an industrial model driven by the needs of transnational corporations. This model produces commodities for the global market. It does not and it cannot feed people. We are all acutely aware of the climate crisis. But how many people realize that the current industrial food system contributes to about 50%, half of all the global greenhouse gas emissions today? You get this figure if you add up the emissions from agriculture itself, plus the change in land use, when forests are plowed under to make turned into plantations, plus the enormous distances, the energy wasted in the enormous distances that food today has to travel, food and feed, across the world, plus the energy that goes into processing and freezing for an increasingly industrialized food system, plus the waste of energy and food in the increasingly centralized supermarket chains. If you add up all these different elements of the food chain today, you come to the total sum of about half of all the greenhouse gases in the world come from the food system. Still, in Durban, today, this week, agriculture is not centrally on the agenda. Food sovereignty, which prioritizes agroecological farming and local markets, can massively reduce the emissions. Grain has calculated that just by focusing on soil fertility restorations, soil building, we could offset between 1/4 and 1/3 of all current global annual gas emissions. 1/4 and 1/3 of greenhouse gases could be built back into the soil by just paying attention to sustainable agriculture, by just building soil fertility. Small farmers can indeed cool the world. They can also feed the world. Earlier this year, the United Nations Special Rapporteur to the Right to Food presented a report showing that agroecology, if sufficiently supported, can double food production in entire regions within 10 years. Double food production within 10 years, while mitigating climate change and alleviating rural poverty at the same time. Others have shown that policies oriented towards promoting local markets, short circuits, and peasant farming all help to do the same. The issue is as simple as keeping food and food production in the hands of people rather than in the hands of corporations. Still, peasants, fishers, fisherfolk, pastoralists, and other food producers have never been more in danger of extinction than today. Never before has so much money gone into the industrial food system. The last decade has witnessed a spectacular increase in speculation on the food commodity markets, sending up food prices everywhere. With today's global financial and economic crisis, speculative capital is searching for safe places to multiply. Food and farmland are such places. Everybody has to eat is the new mantra preached in boardrooms, in corporate boardrooms. The race is on to take control over the world's food-producing resources: seeds, water, and land, as well as the global distribution of food. And today, much of these resources are in the hands of the poor. For example, 90% of India's milk market, the milk market in India, which is the biggest in the world, is in the hands of millions of small dairy farmers and vendors who collect milk and bring it fresh to the consumers in the towns. These are the kinds of markets that corporations, banks, and investors now want to take over. Money is also flowing directly into farming and land acquisitions, buying up land. Banks, investment houses, and pension funds are actively buying up farmland all over the world. The data on the contracts are very hard and difficult to get hold of, but current estimates are that between 60 and 80 million hectares of land have fallen under control of foreign investors for the production of food in the last few years only, worldwide. This is equal to half the land, the farmland, of all of the European Union. And this happened in the past few years only. Most of this is happening in Africa, where people's customary rights to land are being grossly ignored. This latest trend in land grabbing is only one part of a larger attack on land, territories and resources. Land grabs for mining, tourism, biofuels and the construction of infrastructure projects, timber, and now, more recently, also carbon trading, are all part of the same processes turning farmers into refugees on their own land. There is much to be done. But Grain would like to use this opportunity here in the Swedish Parliament to call for one specific action. We want an immediate end to the global farmland grab today, an urgent and massive recall of land grabbers, like what the food safety authorities do when they want to try to get contaminated food out of the system. We call on everyone to do whatever is possible to stop the international flow of money for global acquisitions of farmland and to restitute these lands to the all affected rural communities. Stopping land grabbing is not just about what's legal. It's about what's just. Here in Sweden, people can start by taking on companies like Black Earth Farming, which have bought or leased farmland overseas. They're not allowed to do this in Sweden, and they should not be permitted to do so abroad. Campaigns can be launched to pressure Swede Fund, which is using taxpayers' money to finance the land grabber ADAX in Sierra Leone. The Swedish pension fund, AP2, is also going into the global farmland acquisitions as a new strategy to supposedly protect the retirement savings of working Swedes. Swedish development aid projects ought to be scrutinized, as we have already indications that some of them are promoting land grabbing activities in Mozambique and elsewhere. Such actions and campaigns are already brewing in other parts of Europe and in the United States. They should be strengthened and they should be supported to stop land grabbing at the very source. Ladies and gentlemen, rural communities have fed the world for millennia. Today, the massive expansion of large-scale industrial farming is destroying our capacity to move on and to feed the world. At Grain, we will continue exposing what is going wrong while fighting for an equitable, just and sustainable food system, together with peasant organizations and other social movements. This award gives this struggle a tremendous boost. We see it not only as an acknowledgement of our work, but also as a powerful recognition of the contribution of countless people and organizations engaged in the struggle for genuine, community-based food sovereignty. Together, we will continue this struggle. We have no other option if we are to survive on this planet with some dignity. Thank you very much for this award and for your attention.